Great. Okay, I think we'll kick off. So, welcome everyone to our fourth webinar now, Social Value Portal webinar. We've been running these since April, and we've already had three webinars covering the release of the COVID TOMs. We did a detailed workshop on the TOMs, and we've also had a webinar covering contract management. If you go to the next slide, Tom, we do, for those who want to book ahead, we've got some great webinars coming up. 14th of July, we've got a webinar looking at how you integrate social value into the planning process, and we'll have Software Council on that panel. We'll have a developer, a company called First Base, will be presenting as well. We're looking forward to that discussion. Then 27th of July, the end of July, we're going to have a session on climate emergency that Nathan Good, one of my fellow directors, is going to be leading, and plainly a lot of councils have declared a climate emergency, and the question is how do the TOMs reply to that. Incidentally, we are recording this, and we've had a question up about previous recordings, and we do have previous recordings of all of the other seminars or webinars. If anyone wants those, please could you put a comment, so just asking the Q&A, and then one of the team will get back to you with the links to those webinars. And then later in the year, so over the summer, we're actually going to open up a big consultation or conversation, let's say, and really what we're looking to do is develop a set of TOMs around recover and then renew. I've been working on a set of national TOMs for Wales, and we'll be launching those on the 13th of October. And then, very excitingly, we normally have our National Social Conference every year, and it's obviously usually in person. We've bitten the bullet and said we're not going to do it in person this year, but we are going to give you more for your buck. So we're going to have a whole week of events, perhaps not a whole week, but certainly 3 or 4 days, or events spread over 3 days, possibly 4. And that'll be in January, just putting that program together, but we're covering a lot of the stuff that we've done already, and also a lot more. So watch out for that. Next slide, please, Tom. So we're here to talk about SMEs in particular, and I've put up in front of you a few facts. So SMEs, 60% of all employment provided by SMEs. 99% of all businesses in the UK are SMEs, and something that a lot of you I don't know if everyone knows this, but SMEs, through their business tax, or businesses, and SMEs being part of that, provide 20% of the income to our local authorities and our councils. Now, plainly, as pressure mounts on small businesses, especially through COVID, but we've seen it across all businesses, we're going to see a reduction in the ability of these businesses to pay their business tax, and by, in the same way night follows day, less income to local authorities means their inability or reduced budget to spend on our public services. So there is a direct link between the success of a business community, SMEs within a local authority area, and the delivery of the public services. Plainly, the converse is true. So a local authority area that is thriving with businesses plainly will have more money to spend, which is great. But we've all been hit by COVID. So the question is, how do you respond to that? One of the issues that has always dogged us around the SME world is the issue of red tape. The Social Value Act requires us to embed social value into decision-making procurement. The question is, how do you do that? But more importantly, how do you do it to ensure that there is not more red tape for SMEs that reduces their ability to engage? And so is the Social Value Act more of a burden than an opportunity? And I guess that sits at the core of what we want to talk about today, is understand how the Social Value Act is impacting. You'll understand how SMEs are responding. and then look at how local authorities and businesses can respond and ensure that SMEs thrive. And indeed, our experience is that using the TOMs as one methodology is a way of levelling up that playing field. Next tab, please. So how's government doing? Well, they had promised some time ago now that the target spend for every £1 in three, i.e. 33% of central government buying should go to SMEs. Now, central government is, as of the end of last year, way behind. They are only spending 1 in 14 pounds on SMEs. Local government is a lot better. They're doing 1 in 4, but still a little way off the 1 in 3. So we've got quite a way to go. Central government has a mountain to climb. Local government are doing a lot better. But nonetheless, I think it's something that we all have to be aware of and tackle. Next slide, please, Tom. So we have a fantastic range of panelists, a lot to get through today. So we've got Rachael Morgan, who's Procurement Manager at West Midlands Combined Authority. We've got Angela Halliday, Director of Social Impact for UK and Ireland Sodexo. We've got Campbell Macdonald, Managing Director of Storyboard, and also on the SME panel for central government. We've got Arnab Dutt, who's the Chair of the Social Value Policy Unit for the Federation of Small Business. And we then have Terry Brewer, who is our Social Value Portal Public Sector Lead. Next slide, please. So we're going to go through, cover the setting the scene, look at how the public sector respond, which is what Rachel will look at. Angela will cover the private sector. And then Terry will talk about a couple of user guides that we're releasing. And finally, a panel discussion. Next slide, please. A little bit about the Social Value Portal. We're an online platform that helps organisations measure, procure, contract manage and report social value. At the centre of our solution sits the national TOMs, and those of you who know us well will be very used to what the national TOMs look like and how they work. And the national TOMs have been endorsed by the Local Government Association. They also allow organisations to map social value against their global goals. So we've got a holistic sort of online one-stop solution for design, delivery, contract management and reporting. Next slide, please, Tom. Just a little bit of protocol. You've got a Q&A, you've got a chat box. So if you do have questions, they will pop up in front of me, and then I'll be managing those questions as we go through and certainly bring them up during the panel discussion. So if you want to ask a question, please do just write a question in the Q&A panel. Next slide, please, Tom. We're also going to have some polls, and we're going to start off here. And we do this every time. So we're going to kick off with a series of 6 questions, some basic ones. So what sector are you from? If you're a business, what size are you? You know, are you small, medium, large? Are you here as a buyer or supplier? If you're a buyer, do you think that social value makes it easier or harder for SMEs to win work? If you're a supplier, do you think that social value should be included in tenders? And then the question for everyone, do you think that buyers should take positive action to ensure SMEs are engaged? So here we have the question. So work your way through the answers and then submit. We'll give you 45 seconds or so to answer these questions. And what's interesting about the questions, we will be, when we send out the recording and also the slides, which you'll get after this, you'll also get the results of the polls as well. And we've had some really quite interesting information come in through the polls. And to date, it's been a very positive thing about embedding social value into procurement. And it's going to be interesting to see how everyone responds today. If you keep it open just for a bit longer, Tom. Another 15 seconds. And here we go. So half of you public, half private, which is great. Bit of education, health, third sector, other. If you work your way down, Tom, so if you're a business, micro, 10 people or less, Tom, could you just slide them ground so we can see? There we go, I can do that, sorry. Yeah, so if you're business, micro, small, or medium, and got some larger businesses on board as well, who presumably are buyers in their own right. So that's interesting to see that split there. So we got lots of buyers here and suppliers, and then some of you just for interest. Buyers, do you think social value makes it easier or harder for SMEs to win work? So 14% think it's harder, 12% think it's easier, and then a quarter of you think that it is doesn't make a difference as long as it's done well, which is good, level playing field. But nonetheless, I think we need to address that 14%. Suppliers, do you think social value should be included? That's interesting. 61%, vast majority of you, and actually none of you have said that it makes it harder, especially for SMEs. So that is very positive, good. And it might be interesting, Arnab, for you to just pick that up and comment on that when you come to your conversation. And then do you think buyers should take positive action to act? And then find interesting, so the vast majority of you say yes, a few of you go for Darwin's law, survival of the fittest, and then some of you say it's just a very small percentage say it's okay. Okay, we've got a good question here which we'll come to from Helen, and I'll bring that up, Helen, during the panel discussion. Next slide, please, Tom. So without further ado, can I pass it on to Arnab and also Campbell, who are going to set the scene for us. Arnab.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Guy, for asking me to speak today. So let's look at my slide. Every SME should have something like this on a wall in the office to remind them every day what they need to be doing. In fairness, the COVID-19 emergency has been a wake-up call to many. Our FSB 2019 report, Small Business Big Heart, which I recommend you all read, evidences that SMEs play a huge role in the social fabric of local communities, doing work large corporates just cannot do. Our recently released report, New Horizons, which you can access on our FSB website, evidences that during this COVID crisis, 57% of SMEs are carrying out community work, 23% are providing PPE to their workforces, 24% are donating to food banks, and 30% have made changes to their business model. It is often a crisis that accelerates the necessary system changes that are needed, and this crisis has highlighted the flaws in the architecture of our economy, systemic inequality of our supply chains. So let's have a closer look at this slide. Coming towards UK SMEs, increased mandated emphasis on social value in public and private sector procurement. So if you're an SME, it's happening. You can either address it or you ignore it and you'll be in trouble. Then you're facing the new post-Brexit trade environment and a new post-COVID commercial environment, all of which have their own challenges. And behind all of that, we have a climate emergency and the huge global economic and environmental impact that will have. On top of that, we've got continued government legislation and policy changes and the rollout of a large infrastructure program, and possibly a long-term global economic downturn, and perhaps COVID-20. And behind us, what have we got? A legacy of underinvestment in UK infrastructure, decades of bipartisan failure to implement a long-term industrial strategy. Unfortunately, the UK has massive underinvestment in R&D and innovation, especially in the SME sector. And COVID-19 is showing us that we continue to use rather redundant business models. We're faced with cultural stasis and a huge lack of scenario planning. So for you SMEs and for everyone, this is going to be a very important time, if you are to grow and survive, to review your business models and your physical footprint in the light of the sustainability and SDG agenda, reviewing your HSE policies in the light of COVID-19, developing a recovery and resilience strategy inclusive of social value and the UN SDGs, and really importantly right now, reviewing your ability to access capital and investment. And really importantly, if you're going to join supply chains, develop strategies around innovation and disruption. Now, it's all very challenging and rather scary, but it is a time for introspection and re-examination in order to make our society and economy more resilient so it can leap forward, not just survive, but thrive. And that means a level of cooperation and education from top to bottom of the supply chain. Importantly, the TOMs will play an important role in helping SMEs to understand what they have to do and the importance of recording and measuring outputs. The Social Value Act and social value procurement is the future, and that is the message we need to get out to SMEs in the UK, that public sector and private sector procurement is going to be about wider stakeholders and not just the cheapest tender. It is not business as usual. Those that cannot accept this and ignore it will be setting themselves up for failure, which is why we as a group need to succeed and persuade SMEs of the beneficial business case of embedding social value in the DNA of their organisations. And we are a long way from that, as experienced by first-hand conversations I have with many small businesses who still regard our road of travel with suspicion. We cannot change systems until we have changed minds. It's really as simple as that. And that is where the TOMs and the SME toolkit will be invaluable. We need to tell persuasive stories in order to engage more SMEs and onboard them. And I'll talk about that more in detail. But in 2008, the company I owned won a 3-year supply framework to TfL for work that had to be completed for the London Olympics in 2012. And because of that framework, I was able to win work from many other tier 1 suppliers who were also involved in the Olympic infrastructure project. During the economic collapse that then occurred in the following 3 years, many SMEs went to the wall. I, however, survived and thrived, hiring people and was working at full capacity. I was paid on time and with no worries because I was in a public sector supply chain. And stories like mine and others like it are going to be important to tell, especially with what is coming our way as illustrated in this slide. In terms of social value being embedded, even in a simple business, we as social value evangelists need to tell stories about even the smallest company being able to provide a model that shouts to social value and being ready to win tenders. Now, some of you know the story of Radiant Cleaners who won an award at the Social Value conference this year. They're based in Nottingham. They employ people who are homeless, have mental health problems, substance abuse problems, are ex-offenders. But by working with VCSCs in training, mentoring, and providing full-time employment, Radiant Cleaners has embedded social value into its DNA and is winning business because of it. And these are the stories we need to gather and to tell. We need to demonstrate that public sector supply chains can be engines for support and growth for SMEs in economically troubled times. So I would ask all of you to share your stories and case studies of success and best practice. So let's come back to the importance of onboarding SMEs and having a toolkit that guides and explains what SMEs have to do and the use of TOMs to give direction on impact measurement. The most important issue is for SMEs to understand the commissioning process. And in my honest opinion, public procurement commissioners, tier 1 and 2 commissioners, have a special responsibility in guiding and shepherding SMEs through this process. And that means practical help, directing them to the toolkit and the TOMs. It also means helping them understand how to use these tools. If this is not done, we will never achieve the central government target of onboarding enough SMEs to spend £1 in 3 with them and ensure they participate fully in the infrastructure projects being rolled out. Having seen the achievement of local government best practice in onboarding SMEs, I believe central government can be more ambitious. So let me then talk about onboarding. The Social Value Working Group on the SME panel, and that's myself and Campbell, who will be speaking shortly, have recommended to government we must reduce the hurdles for SMEs to quickly onboard the public sector supply chain. Presently, it can take up to 7 months to pass through the processes to onboard a framework or a contract. Ideally, we need to make the argument this should be brought down to 24 hours. To help SMEs and the whole supply chain, we have supported a passport system called Tell Us Once. And I know many primes would like this to happen. And this must succeed if we are to populate those supply chains with SMEs and micro businesses with innovative and disruptive ideas that can bring real value. Pre-market engagement and targeted meet the buyer webinars hosted by the public sector and prime suppliers will be hugely important in directing SMEs towards the toolkits and the advice they need. I'm pleased to say the outsourcing playbook, which is the central government's principal source of commissioning guidelines to its commercial buying teams, now finally mentions social value on page 15 and gives improved guidance to SMEs. I welcome this progress, but government can do better, and it must do better. And we also need to address the elephant in the room, which must be part of the social value SME agenda on top of and including SDGs, and that is the structural inequalities faced by BAME communities and BAME owned businesses highlighted by COVID-19. In 2020, presently, only 5 companies in the FTSE 100 have a policy on diverse and inclusive supply chains. So while you think on that, I will now hand you over to my colleague, Campbell Macdonald, who sits with me on the Social Value Working Group on the Cabinet Office SME panel, and I'll be happy to respond to any questions later.
Thanks, Arnab. Really appreciate that. So look, I'm literally just going to spend 2 or 3 minutes just adding a little to what Arnab has said. So as he mentioned, we sit on the SME panel, just so people know what that is, if you haven't heard of it. Crown Commercial Service sits in Cabinet Office. CCS put together a group of about 30 plus founders and directors of SMEs. Our role is to feed directly into policy development, to support and to challenge government on meeting that £1 in every 3 spend target with SMEs. So I chased the Cabinet Office, Crown Commercial Service this week just to try and get the latest to share with you on this panel. So what we're given to understand is that there is an intention to make social value through procurement one of the central planks of the government's COVID recovery strategy. They consulted last year, as we know. I'm hoping a number of you will have fed into that. We're led to expect that the launch of their new approach to evaluating and reporting on social value is coming in weeks, not months. Clearly that comes with all sorts of caveats about government having a lot on its plate, but nonetheless, they have also suggested that their policy, when they announce it, will support a key role in recovery for SMEs, VCSEs and startups. So we wait to see the detail of that. It's worth also adding that for months now, Cabinet Office have actually been driving what they describe as kind of mass behavior change campaign to really raise levels of understanding of social value and build that into tenders across kind of hundreds of commissioners and buyers in central government departments and agencies. I'm not sure if any of you are on this call. If you have any insights into any of that, I'd gladly love to hear it. It's worth also adding the government's been working closely with commercial buyers and wider stakeholders like the LGA to ensure there's a bit of a consensus around what this can achieve. Final point worth adding, Lord Agnew is the Joint Treasury Cabinet Office Minister, who's leading on the SME agenda. And he joined our last panel meeting and was vocal on the fact that he was pressing number 10 to bring forward the green paper on proposed changes to procurement regs post-Brexit. So Arnab and I will continue to feed in the voice of social value and SMEs through this channel. If there are anybody wants to follow up with emails or things that you think we should be raising, please contact us. Final few points very quickly. I recognize that I'm preaching largely to the converted, but not everybody. Just to reinforce Arnab's point, social value is coming and you need a grip on this agenda. But that said, look, if you're an SME and you're worried that you don't quite have a grip, don't panic. A lot of what you do will tick the right boxes already. There is plenty out there to support you. There's plenty of open source material like the National TOMS. There's plenty of experts, and Guy may well talk about some guides that Social Value Portal are going to be publishing shortly, specifically aimed at both buyer and supplier side on the SME front. Final point, just to sort of slightly echo, again, Arnab's challenge that if there are any kind of prime or T1 suppliers on the webinar, look, I mean, I'm hoping that you already see the benefits case for helping SMEs in your supply chain to really up their game where they need to on social value. But worth calling out that in addition, the COVID plugin the SVP have already created, for the TOMS, actually explicitly adds weighting to your own tendering if you're supporting your SME ecosystem at this point in time. I think that kind of driver is really, really critical. So that's a lot from me. I'll be quiet, but again, hearing from any of those larger suppliers if they're on the webinar.
Thanks, Campbell. Thanks very much, Campbell and Arnab. Next slide, please. So I think a couple of things that came out. It was interesting to hear the passion with which Arnab spoke about and the need for SMEs to address this issue. It's great to hear that the government finally is going to come up with their sort of ideas around embedding social value. And the other key thing I think we can pick up later is this issue around positive action. And Arnab in particular mentioned structural inequalities that exist and how do we ensure that there's not only SMEs but BAME-owned material businesses, women-owned businesses get their opportunities. We're going to hear directly now from the public sector. So as represented by Rachael Morgan, and Rachel is the procurement manager for the West Midlands Combined Authority. Rachel, all yours. Next slide, please.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks very much for the opportunity to speak today. Much appreciated. Yes, thanks for the introduction. I'm Rachael Morgan. I'm a procurement manager at the West Midlands Combined Authority. I've worked in public sector now for about 18 years in a procurement environment, and I currently manage about 8 procurement professionals, although we are hoping to extend that quite shortly as well. Next slide, please. So this is really briefly what I'm talking to you about today. I'm going to tell you a bit about who I am, who we are, a bit of background around our social value policy, how we've engaged with SMEs before and what came out of that engagement, and then a bit around progress to date and what else we're doing around the wider organisation. So next slide, please. So very briefly, who we are in case you've never heard of us. We were a company called Centro back in 2016, which was predominantly a transport related company in the West Midlands. And then in 2016, we became the West Midlands Combined Authority. The leadership comes from the Mayor of the West Midlands, which is Andy Street, and we work very closely with the 7 constituent authorities that are listed on this slide here. And what we're doing is we're building a happier, healthier and better connected, more prosperous West Midlands. And I quite like that because I think that actually links in very nicely with social value and what we're trying to achieve through social value as well. Next slide, please. So this is our strategic economic plan and what we're planning to do over the next 30 years to help the West Midlands and to help people improve the quality of life with people within the West Midlands. So this is a diagram to sort of show how we're hoping to spend that 8 billion And more recently this week, we've actually put in some bids to get some more money to help specifically with COVID-19. And I'll touch on that later on as well. But being part of a procurement team for the West Midlands Combined Authority, we're very lucky because we get to get involved in all these really exciting projects. So you can see in here, one day you can be buying a pen, a pencil, next it's getting involved in metro extensions and major builds and those sorts of things. So as you can see, a massive opportunity for us to really take advantage of social value and get that into tender documents and get some really great results. Next slide, please. So we created a social value task force group back in 2016, and that represented, it had members from all across the West Midlands, local authorities and procurement representatives from across there. What we did is together we tried to make a social value policy that could be applied across the whole of the West Midlands. And the aims really of creating the policy are what is on your screen right now, really. You know, it talks into, you know, our mantra of building a healthy, happy community. And we wanted a collaborative approach across the West Midlands. We really want to be helping to create skills and employment. And as I mentioned earlier, improving life chances for all. So what we did, briefly, our journey to social value, the task force group developed the policy together. And then in 2017, Andy Street actually helped launch the policy, which was really great to have someone of that stature behind it to push and get the message across how important social value was. And we actually launched the policy at the Social Value Portal's national event as well, which was great. And I can't forget that Social Value Portal also helped us quite a lot in setting up that policy as well. So then in 2018 was when we started to actually apply the policy into procurement, and we had a really positive response. I think, you know, it was really accepted very well. It's been a lessons learned progress all the way through, to be honest, and we're still learning now, and that's one of the reasons I'm here today, is to learn from people as well around how we can carry on improving and getting good results as well. Next slide, please. So we realised during our social value task force groups that there was a little bit of a gap in terms of the public sector and how we engage, particularly with SMEs, VCSEs, that sort of thing. And we realised that we don't understand what the barriers are. We haven't engaged enough to understand how we can help. So in late 2019, last year, we worked together with some of our constituent authorities. We worked with the Social Value Portal as well. And we had a day all around sort of engagement. So we had some really good speakers. There was support around where to look for opportunities, information about how to build a good bid, writing good bids. And we had a lot of support from the Social Value Portal around talking about what is a good social value response, what the TOMs mean, those sorts of things. And what this slide shows, and I'm really quite pleased with this, is this was the feedback we got. We got around 80 to 90 people attend on the day, and we just asked a few questions at the end of the event to see how useful it was, because sometimes it's hard to know if it's the first time. And basically the blues and the reds in the pie charts here represent either they strongly agree with the questions or that they agree with the questions. So it's a really positive feedback around what we're doing. But as I say, that was just the starting point really of our engagement with SMEs, and we're hoping to do a lot more in the future as well. Next slide, please. So one of the things that did come up, apologies, there's a spelling mistake in the middle square as well, so my apologies for that. What we did notice was there was a lot of questions around just some guidance around how to submit a good response. So this is whether you're submitting a tender response or whether you're submitting a social value response. This sort of guidance went in hand in hand. And they might seem like really obvious things, I suppose, if you see them here on this screen, but really we see this sort of thing on a daily basis. So just wanted to sort of give a few tips and hints around what we see regularly in terms of when we're evaluating tender responses back. So some of it's really, really obvious. So read the tender documentation in full before you respond. Think about key dates and get those marked in your calendar so that you're not rushing to get your response in. read the question in full, which I know sounds like the most obvious advice in the world, but if there are 6 bullet points to that question, make sure that you answer all of those 6 bullet points so that you can really get the most out of the scores that are available for those questions as well. Relate to the brief often, think about how you can provide examples to further demonstrate, what it is that you are trying to sell yourself. It's your opportunity to say how great you are and what you can do. So give examples, go to town on what it is and really demonstrate to us what it is that you can do. Don't respond at the last minute. We've seen this so many times where people are scrabbling to try and get a response in 5 minutes before the closing deadline, and there's a lot of panic and stress. I know it's a lot to ask and there's a lot of questions to fill in, but if you can try and sort of bear in mind when the deadlines are and submit a response in good time, that would be good. And lastly, if you're not sure, please do come and ask us questions. If we set a tender out and you're just not sure what we mean, we're absolutely open to people to ask clarification questions so that we can make sure that you are clear on what it is that we want from you as well. Next slide, please. So just a bit around moving on to SME engagement to date and what it is that we've been doing. So this is data directly from the social value portal and is directly around the engagement we've had through applying our social value policy through the social value portal. And in here, we've just got some figures around medium-sized employees and some micro size organisations as well, and just some figures on there around the engagement. We've had quite a lot of high levels of engagement with smaller sized companies as well, and that's led on to 42% medium sized companies receiving contracts and 8% in micro, and then the value of contracts overall, 26% gone to medium and 4% to micro. So it's probably worth just mentioning here that in the few years that we've had the policy going, we've actually committed to £2.5 million worth of social value commitments. So I'm really proud of that, and I'm really excited to see that we are making a difference within the local community as well, which is really great. And the last slide just to talk about there is we've also got some further initiatives which are happening. So I'm not directly involved in these myself, but I am supporting some of these, but I think it's it's really worth mentioning now because they'll help sort of with the conversations later on as well. We've got a social economy task force objectives. So earlier on this year, our board approved 6 objectives, which will be specifically focusing on initiatives around social investment and working with social enterprises. So I think they're really good, and I think it's a really big step forward for the Combined Authority to be making these bold statements. Now, of course, these are just the early starts of these objectives, so it will be really interesting to see how they develop. In terms of procurement support, we're working on baseline figures now, and then we'll be helping support how we get those figures up and get some really great results moving forward. And then finally, just on the COVID business support, we've just got some bits and pieces here around what's going on and what's being supported. So there is a page on our website, which I've provided on the last slide here, which is about what you can get in terms of business support to help in the recovery period. There's information about reopening businesses, and there's some information around grant funding and those sorts of things. And then just finally, there is just straight off, hot off the news press, if you like. This week we've revealed that we'll be getting, we'll be looking to get £3.2 billion to help with the recovery of COVID, and that will be focusing on things like jobs, improvement to digital and transport links, and to housing. So there's a lot of things out there that Andy Street's helping to drive, and I'm really hoping that those will lead into to some good things in procurement as well.
That's great, Rachel. Thanks very much indeed. Okay, some fantastic stuff then. I think it's great to see your stats as well. If you go on to the next slide, please. And Angela, I know we've got Angela and Terry now, but if I encourage you guys to keep to your time slot, that'd be great, because I do want to have some discussion at the end of this. So Angela, the floor is yours. Next slide.
Thank you, Guy. Good afternoon, everyone. And like my colleagues, it's a pleasure to be with so many of you today. As Guy said, I'm Angela Halliday. I'm the Director of Social Impact for the UK and Ireland at Sodexo. Sodexo, being one of the largest outsourcing companies in the world, we currently operate in over 72 countries and are currently a strategic supplier for the UK government. However, we do very much pride ourselves in having a community footprint and a genuine desire and passion for delivering quality of life services for our people, our communities, consumers, and in particular our SME and VCSE network, who are absolutely core to what we do. Social value itself has been very much at the heart of our vision since 1966. We were formed by a gentleman called Pierre Bellon, who himself started as a small business. He built the business from a single food stall in Marseille, France, and today those family values and that small business mentality has stayed with us and very much influences the values that we demonstrate in the way in which we deliver our services. So what I'll do is I'll spend the next couple of minutes hoping to answer the question that Guy posed: can the private sector make a difference? Very quickly, the answer is yes. However, I will introduce you to the approach to embedding social value across Sodexo and the value that we place particularly around our supply chain partners and our wider commitment to the small business community. Next slide, please, Tom. So I think it would be suffice to say, very strange and very challenging times that we're living and working in these days, not so much playing in, well, not for now at least. And you may or may not be familiar with some of the headlines that's on the screen at the moment that have been very much at the forefront of industry over the past year or two. It does demonstrate, however, that the social value movement has been building momentum for some time now. However, it's never been more important that businesses act responsibly and do the right thing for the right reason than it is now. So hopefully some good will come from the awful circumstances in terms of putting social value at the front of all that we do as a society. And whilst government very much drive this agenda, and we've heard about that earlier on from Arnab, they will continue to do that as part of their societal and economic recovery planning from COVID. But we as an industry specialists, no matter how big or small, must step forward to explore new ways of doing business, very much driven by the desire to create a meaningful difference to people, places and our planet. Small businesses create most of the social value in the UK, and as such, Sodexo's alignment with small businesses absolutely enhances what we collectively do for the nation. Next slide, please, Tom. At Sodexo, we've tried to simplify what is a very complex landscape. Everything is important. Everything seems to be a priority, each of which is different depending on who you speak to, and I'm sure that you'll all recognise that. Using Tom's framework definitely helps Sodexo with prioritising the way in which we wanted to fully embed social value in all that we do. It helped us understand what we can and what we should do and the ways in which we could measure to optimise that return on investment for communities and of course for our clients. And it's also fair to say that society demands change. They demand and expect public monies to be spent effectively and that services are delivered with care, compassion and consideration of their needs. So our less is more approach allows Sodexo to deep dive to make this meaningful difference. And we cannot and do not achieve this alone. Our partners, clients and supply chain are absolutely pivotal to our success. Our commitment in particular to small businesses is very much evident through ways in which we do our business. And a couple of examples are around the in-kind support that we provide for businesses, where we deliver coaching and mentoring free of charge to help increase capabilities, competencies and competitiveness of small businesses across their marketplace through technical and professional services. We also gift our apprenticeship levy and we ring fence a significant amount of money to do that. Only just this week, we've reached out to over 3,600 small businesses across the UK, offering the gift of our apprenticeship levy to them, which will hopefully allow them to recruit and retain talent, particularly during these challenging times. Our SME inclusion programme, and we spoke earlier about Meet the Buyer events, we do these very regularly, and where we look to support businesses like yourself to engage with large suppliers, and we help mentor and grow the businesses once they're on the supply chain, even as much as enabling them to get immediate access to payments once their invoices are cleared. And then by no means least, our volunteering army. We've got over 40,000 employees across the UK committed to providing citizenship support to local businesses and individuals. So by no stretch of the imagination, lots going on there in terms of SMEs and VCSEs, but we're very much interested in what matters to you, and would really welcome your views and look forward to the next part of the discussion. Next slide, please, Tom. As I said earlier, everything is important. So how do we achieve this less is more approach to achieve a meaningful focus impact on what matters most? The National TOMS framework has significantly helped us shape our strategy and target what we believe is the most important areas to concentrate on. We've done that through consultation, but also developing and working alongside our colleagues within Social Value Portal, but across the National Social Value Task Force over the last few years. The framework itself very much, as I said, encouraged and informed our strategy, but what it also did was allow us to drill down into key areas, such as employing local people. We recently done an exercise with Social Value Portal to help understand what percentage of our local employees, for example, came from left behind communities. Very much at the forefront of all of our minds at the moment as the gap widens, particularly due to COVID-19. And in doing this exercise with the Social Value Portal, it's helped us further shape what our employee value proposition should look like, our onboarding and recruitment process. So thanks again to Guy and the team for that. Over the last few months, and I think most certainly over the coming years, as we live with COVID-19, it is inevitable that these priorities will continue to shift. We all have a responsibility, I believe, to close the gap. That gap is getting bigger due to the pandemic. And at Sodexo, we believe together with our small business network, we can create better opportunities, bigger opportunities for those that need it most, creating that lasting legacy of social growth. And on to my final slide, please, Tom. And on the screen here, I've just listed a couple of initiatives that Sodexo are offering today to you as a small business community, that should you wish to get in touch with us, please do so. We're here to help with your recovery planning, helping you rise with Sodexo. We will happily talk through how we can help you recruit talent into your business, particularly around areas where they need it most through apprenticeship and career pathways. And also, should you need support, particularly as Arnab and the rest of the team work through the passport that you referred to, we're on hand to help you try and access large supply chains much quicker. And we certainly don't take 7 months, as Arnab's pointed out. So please do get in touch with us. And very finally, I just wanted to kind of add that we're looking forward to working with Arnab and the Federation of Small Business and raising awareness of social value for SMEs through a series of virtual masterclasses over the coming months. So please do watch this space. Exciting times ahead. So that's me. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Angela. And we will come to the questions, especially from Luke, who has posted a couple of challenging questions for you, Angela, which we'll pick up as soon as we get through Terry.
No problem.
Terry, floor is yours. If you could keep it swift, that'd be great.
Got the message, Guy. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. So Terry Brewer, Public Sector Lead for Social Value Portal. So just quickly, why is social value important for SMEs, and why is the understanding of that important? A lot of councils now are including standalone social value weightings within their procurement, and what we are seeing is that those weightings are increasing. So typically 10%, but in many cases 20% and over now. And of course, what that means is that in terms of evaluation, social value can well be the determinant factor in who wins a tender. So it's really important that SMEs are familiar with how social value works in local government procurement and central government procurement arrangements, so that they're in the best position to be able to bid and get the best opportunity of winning. But we appreciate there are some challenges to SMEs in understanding social value, etc. So we've produced 2 guides. Next slide, please, Tom. Before I get onto those 2 guides, we did a survey of local authorities in England to look at who had a social value policy. Rachel explained very eloquently how they've structured their social value policy in WMCA. And what we have is, from our surveys, 23% of councils in England have a policy that you can access online, but 44% make no mention of any policy at all. Now, that doesn't mean they don't have a policy, but if you've got a policy, why hide it? And particularly if you want to encourage SMEs and others to engage with you on social value. So I'd encourage councils to look at getting a policy in place and also making sure you're publishing it. Next slide, please, Tom. So these are the 2 guides we've produced. One is Getting the Most from Social Value, a guide for buyers, and one is a guide for SMEs on how to engage them. They're both simple 7 steps. I think there's a mistake here, actually, Guy. I just noticed one says.
I know, you're right.
That's why I hesitated and paused, because I thought, that's not right.
I know, you're right. I just missed it.
Yeah, so we have 1 guide that's for buyers and 1 guide that is for SMEs. So both of these guides aren't for buyers. One is for SMEs, 1 is for buyers. They're both 7-step guides. They're written in plain English. They have to be, because I'm a plain Englishman, so I wouldn't understand them otherwise. They include the latest TOMS information, and we're just finalising some case studies that we will publish as part of this very shortly. Next slide, please, Tom. So the guide for buyers. So these are the 7 steps. I won't talk through them because you'll be able to have access to the actual guide next week, but they range from social value policy at the start through to market engagement, which has been mentioned already today, making tendering easy, through to monitoring and reporting. So those are the key steps for buyers. Next slide, please, Tom. And I've just picked out a few key points that I think are really important for buyers to think about. I think what we've noticed is that the councils that operate social value the best are those where you've got buy-in right from the top. So having a lead member or portfolio holder and a principal officer who's taking the lead on this within the council is really important and really helps pave the way for success. Doing some work with local SMEs in terms of trying to make your procurements SME friendly size packages, and using dynamic purchasing systems, etc. And we've got what we call TOMS Lite that we have in place, but we're also going to develop a little bit further to really help councils do quotes easily. So you've just got a very simple set of TOMS that you can use in quotes that are easy for buyers to understand, easy for SMEs to understand, so you can get some social value even on fairly low value pieces of work. And then finally, I think one thing I would point out as well is and I think Arnab alluded to this, is making sure that SMEs are paid promptly, not necessarily by the council, but by prime contractors in your procurements. It was one of the things that was highlighted as part of the Carillion collapse, how poorly they were treating SMEs in their supply chain. And I think it's really important that the council take some ownership of that issue to make sure that SMEs in procurements, in supply chains, are being paid promptly by prime contractors. Next slide, please, Tom. So these are the 7 steps for SMEs. Again, I won't go through them, but just to say they range from really getting yourself ready for procurement, getting involved in any market engagement that's going on, making, and I'd emphasise Rachel's point about answering the question. This I can't tell you how many times, because my background is procurement, so I've seen so many companies answer the question they wish had been asked, not the question that has been asked, and we can only score you and evaluate your offer based on the question that has been asked. So don't tell us what you'd hoped to been asked. Just make sure that you're familiar with what's being asked of you by way of social value. You're clear what your offer is, and you're responding to the question that's been put to you. Next slide, please, Tom. And then just once again, just quickly picking out some key points from SMEs. Really, one of the problems I think we've seen from SMEs is they're doing social value, but if you say to them, give us some social value, they don't necessarily understand what you mean by social value. So using simple language, and the TOMS is a really good, simple way of explaining to SMEs, this is what we mean by social value. These are the areas that you can help us with. But again, being clear about how you're answering questions, because across local government there is inconsistency in how the Social Value Act is being applied. We're working with lots of councils who use the TOMS, but a number of councils doing their own thing, and you really need to make sure you understand what they're asking for and how they're asking for it. And then finally, I'd say just make sure you record and provide evidence about your commitments and how you've delivered that. It's really important that local government is able to do contract management well. So if you can help them with that by providing good evidence about what you've delivered by way of social value and how you've done that, that would greatly help their contract management. Next slide, please, Tom. And then just to say, there are some useful links here. They'll be included in the slides that are distributed to you on Monday, that you might want to follow up and just look at those as they provide you additional information and support. I think that's back to you now, Guy.
Great. Okay. Let's just do a quick poll before we enter into a 15-minute panel discussion. So we'll give you a minute to do this, a minute and 15. So buyers, do you have a specific policy for encouraging SMEs within your procurement processes? So that could be private or public sector buyers. If you're a large size business, and there's a few of you on here at the moment, do you proactively seek to use SMEs within your supply chain? As Suzex have been telling us. One for SMEs, what would help you most? You can have a multiple choice. This is just sort of series of questions. And then one for suppliers, whether you're small or big, for users of the TOMS, do you think they help level the playing field between big and small? In fact, we can have buyers answering that as well. So anyone? Oh, in fact, we've got buyers in the question number 5. Sorry, forgive me. It's the same one. So if you're a supplier, answer question 4, and if you're a buyer, answer question number 5. So hopefully you've had time to do that now, and you have to answer all the questions in some way or other before you can submit. Okay, Tom, do you want to pull that up? So if you're a buyer, do you have specific policies? So it's interesting, not yet developing them. A lot of you aren't buyers, so okay. Large size suppliers, positive action, good. And there's a few of you who are small size organisations answering that. What would be most helpful? More information, social value from councils. Yeah, easy way to engage with tier 1 providers. Okay. And then if you're a supplier, it's about the TOMS. Yes, they help. So that's good to hear. And if you're a buyer, yes, they help. So that's good to hear. Okay. So that's kind of interesting. We'll publish these with it. So look, I'm going to get straight into the questions now. We've got 15 minutes left. So I'm going to start off with a couple of challenges, actually. Luke, has put a couple of challenges out there, and I'm going to start off with his first challenge, which he thinks that, I think, Luke, you said that social value is effectively creating uneven playing field for SMEs. So it's not even between the big and the small. I think that's what the nature of the question you asked. So I'm going to ask Arnab to answer that, if I may, and then I'll bring one or two others into that. Arnab, do you want to just tackle that first?
Absolutely, Guy. Luke, you're absolutely right. The fact is that it is a horribly uneven playing field. Small businesses do not have the resources. They don't have the ability to identify in a structured way what is and what isn't social value. And that's why we're doing what we're doing here, in terms of working with government, making sure the guidance is there, making sure that the TOMS and the toolkit, the SVA, is going to be cogent and precise. But more importantly, it's what I said before, we will need the full participation of the Tier 1 and Tier 2 suppliers, Rachael, Angela, to shepherd, to guide, to mentor, to demonstrate best practice, because as you said, it is a very uneven playing field. So those are the strategies for amelioration. Those are the strategies, and of course, one of mine was how do we onboard more quickly? That's going to be very, very important for the future. So you're right, you've identified one of the major challenge that we're all trying to address here. And hopefully with your help and your input, we'll be able to address it better.
Yeah, great. And Rachael, I think that this is one of the things, I think you do a number of outreach to support SMEs and helping build that capacity. What's your advice to Luke about how to even this playing field up? And even, are you bold enough to say that actually social value has if done well, it could even give an advantage to SMEs?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the way that we work in terms of applying the TOMS in procurement activities, we're not prescriptive about which TOMS bidders commit to. And I think that really gives a good degree of flexibility. And we often find that the SMEs are the ones that can really sell themselves and sort of select the TOMS that are suitable for themselves. So, for example, it might be that they're using a local supply chain or something like that. And we often find we get the best answers from some of the SMEs because they're a lot closer to it and they can really sell what they're doing and sort of give the benefits of how their commitments can really demonstrate benefit in the local community as well.
Okay, great. Thanks, Rachael. One for Angela, again from Luke, actually. Luke's holding it at the moment. He asked the question, why are we listening to Dexo? Why are we listening to a big business in a conversation about small businesses? And so I think that's a fair question, and it might be a tough one, but Angela, tell us.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you so much for the question, Luke. First of all, I think it'd be suffice to say that the social value agenda, kind of led and enveloped by the TOMS framework, encourages businesses to hopefully not just consider engaging with SMEs and VCSEs and micro businesses, but to work in partnership with them. I think this is so important, regardless of the size of your business. We need businesses of all sizes to make the economy work and create social value. As I mentioned earlier, SMEs are the biggest contributor to social value in the UK, and central government, their recovery plan will hopefully, by placing SMEs at the heart of that recovery plan, will further encourage positive business practices. And I suppose my presentation today and the value of me being here, I was trying to get across the key message that, the benefit of working with SMEs and large suppliers collectively, and not only delivering services, but also working together to inform and influence our marketplace through a social value lens, clearly demonstrates our interdependency, as a large supplier on SMEs and VCSEs. So they're pivotal to the Sodexo business and all, I would say, large strategic suppliers. So I think, it's good to have both working towards the same objective. And hopefully today I've demonstrated the commitment that we as a strategic supplier have got to our SME colleagues.
Great. Okay. Thanks very much for that, Angela. Can I ask Terry, this is a question that's come in from Chris Clark. I don't know if you know about this, but has the Crown Commercial Service set a priority for including social value more comprehensively into their framework contracts so that more SMEs are included? What do you know about that update? I know you've spoken to CCS in the past about this.
Yeah, so within CCS frameworks, they are including clauses around social value, which is great. I think it'd be great if they could expand those further, though, because they are fairly limited around certain areas, particularly environment, which of course is good. But I think we need a much more broader view of social value from the government to ensure that that's put into all their frameworks consistently and in a way that local government can really take full benefit of as well. And unfortunately at the moment that's not quite the position we're in. So the more government can do on this, the better.
Yeah, and Arnab, perhaps you can just follow up on that, just in terms of what central government are doing, and also people might be interested to hear about just a little bit about the SME panel that you're on and how you're working with government to promote use of SMEs.
So yeah, thank you, Guy. So what we're trying to do, the SME panel, as Campbell said, is made up of business owners and also organisations. So I represent the Federation of Small Businesses on the panel and chair the Social Value Working Group with Campbell alongside me. And we are there really to lobby for you as small businesses to ensure that social value is deployable, that it isn't a tick box exercise or another huge load of red tape that you have to fight your way through. We want to make it accessible. And to tell you the truth, that's what we're trying to do, and we have to work very much with procurement specialists and commissioners in training and getting to understand how we work and how SMEs think. I work very closely with Angela, because obviously large companies have to protect their supply chain ecosystem, which is hugely valuable to them, and they want it to grow and thrive. So they've got a huge investment if they're thinking properly to make sure that they engage fully with SMEs, and certainly Sodexo does that. I'm happy to say.
Okay, great.
And so but what Terry was saying, just briefly about sort of CCS, it's hard work getting to make cultural change at central government level. But sometimes when you have incidents like COVID-19, it does help accelerate that change, because it means they have to speed up their processes. So it's slow, but it's happening. And if that's not enough for you SMEs out there, I am sorry, but we are trying and we are pushing and we are getting somewhere.
Yeah, and Campbell, I'd be interested to hear your take about whether or not you think SMEs are better positioned or well positioned to do this, and you recognise the resource that they need to put into this, but is it worth putting that resource in, do you think?
Yeah, 100%. I think Terry called it. There is, if you get this right, this has the potential to be a critical differentiator for you, and the context for that is that we're seeing more and more local government, but rapidly increasingly so central government contracts having significant weighting attached to social value. So in that context, if you as a bare minimum, I'd say you've got to do justice to what you already do. And I referenced it very briefly, but most SMEs I work with on this agenda, a lot of them, when they first come to it, just don't realize that a lot of what they do instinctively can be classed as social value and weighted. But that's the bare minimum, and then thinking creatively beyond that is absolutely critical.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Campbell. A question in from Mark for Rachel, actually, directly. And I think, Rachel, you said that you have unlocked a couple of million, £2.1 million worth of social value, or 2.5. And so Mark is asking, how much has that been actually realised, and how are you monitoring that?
Yeah, we said 2.5 million so far that's been committed. Probably what I should explain a bit more is how we measure and monitor that. So if I didn't explain before, we work with the Social Value Portal and they help us manage those commitments and sort of contract manage to make sure those commitments are delivered. So first of all, it isn't just a figure that we're just sort of making up, if you like. We're working with the professionals here to make sure that we do get the right figures. Now, I do apologise, I haven't got the exact details of what has been delivered, but I think last time I checked it was about 1.5 million that had been delivered, and a lot of that has come through. We had some major adult education budget tenders that went out that were broken down into about 9 or 10 lots, and we've managed to get quite a lot through there delivered already, so some really good results through that as well. Apologies, it's not 100% definite figures, but I can come back and get those for you if you need them as well.
Okay, great, thanks. We're having quite a few questions coming up around fair payment or prompt payment, and I'm just going to read out one here for perhaps it's Rachel best to answer this. Sorry, Rach. Do you think central government also has a role to play in supporting SMEs, VCSEs, especially during COVID, and setting a good example in terms of supply chain protections? Many have not honoured their existing contracts and have not paid providers, ! I mean, I know you can't speak on behalf of the central government, but what do you think council should be doing to ensure that they honour their contracts?
Yeah, and I totally understand the position there and the concerns that people are having. We've ourselves gone through, the CCS have issued some really quite good guidance around supplier relief, and we've been actually following the guidance that's been issued by there. But I think it's right. I think it's doing things like this. It's engaging and understanding people's positions and working with those suppliers and looking at contracts and those sorts of things. The work that we're doing specifically from the CI, as I mentioned earlier on, we're doing quite a lot of work with the mayor and sort of engaging. We've had a specialist page set up. So if you've got questions, and there's a weekly economic COVID recovery meeting as well that takes place with a lot of councillors and Andy Street as well. And it's an open forum, so you can submit questions there and those sorts of things. I think the key thing is we're going through really unusual, difficult times, and we need that ability to be able to interact and communicate. And that's the biggest thing I think that we can all learn from each other, really. So I think that would be the
great. So I'm going to do a round robin now, just the last minute, to stretch slightly more. So I'm just going to ask everyone just for one key piece of advice, and I'll start off with Terry. Could you give me one piece of advice that you'd give, right at the top of your list, that you give the buyers?
Market engagement. It doesn't happen enough. Make sure your key suppliers, the SMEs you're trying to attract, and know what you're doing, how you're going to do it, and that they understand, therefore, how to put in good bids for to the council, both for what you want and for social value.
Great, thanks, Terry. Angela, what about you?
Yeah, I would say understand what matters most to the suppliers and align that to the priorities of the buyer, and hopefully no gaps in between. But if there is, work together in closing that gap. Okay,
great. Campbell, what about you to suppliers, the SME community?
I think just get your house in order. You know, and I mean that in as supportive and as positive a way as possible. You will be further ahead on this agenda than you realise. You just got to put some structure around it, and you know, join up with Angela's point. You know, align what you're doing with what your buyers are looking for. Can I add just one quick other thing, Guy? Just on the points about poor, whether it's failure to pay promptly or poor behaviours, whether that's commissioners, buyers, whether it's primes. There is a small business champion, and for the whole of government, and every department now has a small business champion. Arnab and I can channel any poor practice right through to those guys, put you in touch directly if you want those things picked up, poor behaviours picked up. So there's an offer. Okay.
So SMEs, you heard that from Arnab. He's willing to have a chat to the Prime Minister for you. Sounds great. Arnab, what about you? Not to SMEs or buyers. What's your one thing you want to say to central government around this, as you know, as social value leader FSB?
To listen. I really want them to listen to the challenges that SMEs face in onboarding public sector procurement contracts. And I want them to really, and one of my big asks is to ensure that the prompt payment code is policed properly, and especially in this environment. Our SMEs need to be paid on time for the work that they do. And those are my two big asks of central government.
Okay, great. And then finally, Rachel, what can you say to your fellow public procurement buyers and also private sector buyers, your fellow buyers?
I think it's been mentioned earlier, but really understanding what it is that you want to achieve, and then providing really clear guidance. You know, test it out in the market to make sure it's correct first, and make sure what you're asking people to commit to, you understand yourselves, and you're sort of giving really clear guidance on the steps that you need people to take as well.
Great. Okay, everybody. Well, look, thank you so much for your time. We're just a couple of minutes over, so forgive us for that. Any further information, please contact us via info@Social Value Portal. If you've got a question for Arnab or a beef to grind with any business, I guess, you heard Arnab, but well, certainly Campbell, and we can link you up with Campbell as SME representative. So please do that. And we'll be sending out a recording of this along with the results of the polls and also the PowerPoint slides, and also links to the easy guides which you'll be able to get. I know someone asked about the TOMs. The TOMs you can download from our website and also the local government website at no cost. They're free of charge to access as long as you don't use them in any sort of form of commercial reselling capacity. You can use them as an SME to do your own calculations at no cost. They're made free of charge for that. Without further ado, can I also thank very much our panelists, Rachael Morgan from West Midlands Combined Authority. Thanks also to Angela Halliday from Sodexo, Arnab Dutt from FSB, Campbell from the Small Business Panel, and then finally Terry Brewer, who is from Social Value Portal, and then on top of that, Tom Good, who helped put all this together. Remember, we've got some more webinars coming up. We'll send you details, so please do join if you want to. And with that, thanks very much. Enjoy your rest of your day. Goodbye.